you start massaging that alcoholism, like, well, I got to be a little loose. Keith Richards, man, Iggy, you know? And when I got sober, I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to play music again. And how wrong I was. And my first gig was like, oh, you know, I feel everything. And I'm playing, you know, my playing was better. And I'm aware of everything that's going on. Like this big kind of like shield came off. And I'm like, why did I get to this sooner?
Welcome to the Dealing with Feelings webcast. Today I spoke with Duff McKagan. Duff is the bassist for Guns N' Roses, an author, and a mental health advocate. Duff and I spoke about so many things, including Duff's own mental health challenges, how he learned to deal with emotions when he became famous, and a whole lot about finding the strategies that work best for you to support your own mental wellness. I just love the conversation. I learned a ton and was just honestly blown away by Duff's incredible insights around healthy emotion regulation. I hope you enjoy. So, Duff, thank you for joining me on the Dealing with Feelings webcast. I'm super excited to have you. And let's just start off by a question that I have to ask you, which is, how are you feeling lately?
I feel I just got out of kickboxing with my sensei and an old school martial artist friend of mine. We had an amazing session, great reconnecting with this. So I come out of those things feeling enriched. And, you know, we work out hard, so I feel that elation from post-workout as well. You know, then there's chaos because then a bunch of calls and stuff happen on the way home. Mm-hmm. And then, so I use my martial arts to deal with the chaos. Like, okay, it's just one thing at a time. Uh-huh. And I dealt with the things. So you feel a little bit like, okay, I got that sorted.
How do you feel being on a webcast talking about emotional intelligence for an hour?
I'll tell you when we're done.
All right. There you go. You know, being that you just shared that you went to a martial arts class, just thought I would share too, that's been my life I'm 54. Okay. And I started martial arts when I was 18.
Wonderful.
And then taught martial arts for many, many years. Don't teach anymore just because it's hard to have multiple careers, but right. A big part of my life. I'm curious, like when you think about martial arts, what do you think is the biggest thing that you've learned from it?
Whew. The biggest thing I learned from it.
Yeah.
How to be comfortable in my own skin. How to be sober and be comfortable in my own skin. I should elaborate on that, I guess.
Say more. Wait, say that. Say more.
I ended up in a dojo, you know, a few weeks into my sobriety, white knuckle sobriety. Didn't know anything about the AA program or didn't have any friends in there. A friend took me to this dojo. I was kind of a waste of I had, you know, pock marks coming out of me from drugs trying to leave my body. I was a mess. My sensei, I saw a look in his eyes. Benny the Jet, he was like this, you know. Of course, I knew I grew up in the in the 70s and 80s. I knew who Benny Jet was, you know. I've never done martial arts before. But I saw a look in his eyes. I'm like, it's peace. That's just peace and tranquility, and he was sure of himself. And I just followed him. I mean, he accepted me in. He said, if you work hard, you can stay. You know, mm-hmm. If you don't want to work hard, you're out. So I just wanted what was in his eyes. I just followed him. I did 2 days for the next, I don't know, 2 years.
How long have you been doing it for?
That was 1994.
Okay, so it's a while.
It's a while. It is, right? Yeah, 30 years.
And so, like, the big takeaway, like, what do you think it's done for you as a human being?
I mean, to get into it. So I mixed with my Yukita-kan, the spiritual side, the mind, body, spirit part of everybody can kick and punch, you know? Anybody, my daughter, I could teach her how to knock me out in a second, you know, right? Yeah. So everybody can kick and punch. You know, can everybody parry and bob and weave. Can they? No. And then you get into the spiritual side of bobbing and weaving, and the body part of it, of taking abuse or duck. And I took that. It goes way deeper than just those things I mentioned, but you understand what I'm saying. I don't know if other people will fully understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're reminding me of is actually I use that as a form of emotion regulation myself. A parry, like
Yeah.
and you don't have to like knock
No,
them,
no.
just like as long as it doesn't hit you in the face, you're good, right? You just guide it across.
Lie loose and easy, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever, one of my strategies is when I have someone like not so pleasant in front of me, is I will like literally imagine the parry. I'll just like, okay, bye-bye. Just like, I'm going to let their energy kind of just I'm not going to absorb it. I'm going to let their energy just go over there.
Well, yeah, I learned that too. I learned, and it's not something you can teach in a classroom. It was just by doing. And my sensei was, it started very simply. I want you to wake up tomorrow morning. I want you to make your bed and clean your dishes. Clean your dishes when you eat something at home. Put them away, and make your bed and have your body clean. Don't come in here and not clean. Come in here clean and be clean for yourself. And I started to do these things. I keep my house clean, making my bed. And he said, smile in the mirror at yourself in the morning. Look at yourself in the eyes. I'm like, I can't do that,
Uh-huh.
And I tried. And like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would say, 6 months into it, we'd go through these intense physical, carrying guys upstairs and, 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 kicks and 1,000, like the full thing. But after these workouts, it would have these conversations. It'd be one way. All I said was yes, sensei, or no, sensei, But in these, he would say, and would end with something, and he'd say, today's a good day to die. You live your life like this. I'm like, that's morbid. That's morbid. I started, all these things I started doing, working out, yes, sensei, going to bed, drinking water, eating good food, cleaning my stuff. I started being honest with myself, somehow. Started taking account of what I'd done to myself, done to others. And so I started calling or trying to meet people like, hey, I'd had enough sober time, been in this martial arts, which is like cutting out all the fat in your life, And I found out later in AA, that's what you do. You call, that's your fourth step, right? Making amends. And it was one morning, man, I woke up. I could look at myself in the eyes in my mirror because I had nothing from the night before that I was hanging on to. I'd returned all the phone calls from the day before. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's about the days of answering machines. I'll get back to that one, or I'll let it go to answering machine. I pick up the phone now. I pick up the phone because I'm not fearful of what's on the other. What could it be? I don't know. Let's find out. Today is a good day. Today kind of hit me off this one moment. I could look myself in the eyes, and it's not about dying. It's living your life, a clean and honest life, and telling the people that you love them, and tell them often, and pick up the fucking phone. You know what I mean? Do the thing that you were supposed to do yesterday. Do it yesterday. And the thing you're supposed to do today, do it. And so I had nothing on my chest, nothing on my shoulders. I could look at myself, and today's a good day to die means if it's today, I've left nothing else out there. I've left nothing. People know I love them. And, my house is clean. I'm clean. And if it's today, it's not going to be today, but it is today. Today's a good day.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that's what that meant. And all these things kind of came to me at once and very powerful, you know.
I'd like to, people know you as a rock star, right? And now you're still a rock star, but you're a really, you're a mental health advocate. And can you tell me that journey going from, rock star to mental health advocate?
Well, okay. So, I mean, another thing I had to battle when I got sober, the thing I self-medicated was these awful panic attacks that I started getting at about 16. And my first panic attack was, earth moving. Literally, I thought I fell 3 feet in my mom's shower, and I thought there was an earthquake.
Yeah.
I thought there was an earthquake, and I came out of the shower. I thought the house being, the bathroom in shambles, but nothing was in shambles. And I realized nothing fell 3 feet. And so that kind of terror that happens, so that those first few panic attacks, you don't want to go back to. I went to ER the first time. My mom took me to the ER, and I ended up in a room with probably somebody like yourself. And he explained to me, I thought it was because I'd done too much LSD, too much mushrooms. And that was, there was that old school thing like, yeah, man, you're going to have acid flashbacks for the rest of your life. I thought that was and he said, it's not acid flashbacks. And he had this chart out and he was explaining to me what was going on with me. And he drew some things on it. And it was calm. And they gave me probably Valium or something. So things started to chill. But I found that alcohol was a good
strategy.
I thought it was a good strategy. It's my best thinking. Playing in punk rock bands and I got a career in front of me. I want to be a musician, and not for the chicks or the money or whatever. I want to be the best band, and music really fills me up. But I can't get a panic attack when I'm cruising, traveling down to San Francisco and LA from Seattle or up to Vancouver. So, let's drink that away. I got to LA when I was 20. I was by myself. I had panic attacks. Vodka really did the trick. Mm-hmm. The problem is you get addicted to the alcohol. And then you start doing cocaine because you're drinking too much alcohol. And then you start doing pills because you too much cocaine. You want to come back down. Mm-hmm. So it becomes this thing. And for me, it became a thing. And my panic attacks actually got worse because you have all this sugar in your body, all these intoxic, just cocaine's not good for a panic attack. I can tell you. I did the research. Nobody else has to. Trust me. Alcohol is not great. So there I was, again, with my sensei Benny, those first few weeks, and what I'm going to do about panic attacks. I can't drink him away, And so it was something I faced with him, and the more self-confidence I got through that, I could deal with an oncoming panic attack in a way like, okay, this will go away. And I would believe myself. This will pass. I've still battled with them. I have psychiatric help for this, and it's really good for me. It's once a week, whether I need it or not. We check in, and it's great to have that professional to check in with. She talks about my brain and the things, and it's real. I'm a nerd. I read a lot of books, so tell me the brain things and the chemistry So, when it became time, I said something at some point, Mark, maybe it's during like Velvet Revolver, I did an interview and I mentioned something about panic attacks. And I think the writer for this, before like internet where you see feedback, and it was, the writer got a hold of me like a week or so later. 2 weeks later, he's like, man, really powerful what you said. And I'm like, about what? Everybody's talking about it in the office, about the mental health. It's really brave of you to say. I'm like, it's not brave of me. I'm just talking about, I mean, we were talking about sobriety, my panic attack, you know, like just conversational.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, we really affected some people. And I'm like, okay. Well, I started writing about the same time I started writing for the Seattle Weekly. I wrote a weekly column for about 5 years there. And there was, I mentioned in one of my columns about, you know, panic attacks and mental health and blah, blah, blah. And that was online. That was in the paper and it was online. And people, it's right at the beginning when people could comment and do all that stuff. It was huge, man. People all over the world were reading this. And I was like, well, that's really, if I can say something and start this whole conversation, it's healthy.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's calling out. You know, probably nowadays, if you did it on Twitter, you have people call you out. I don't know. I don't care. I just think it's helpful. And while I'm here on this earth, if I can be helpful, that's it to others. But I do something so simple, you know, I'm all here for it.
I appreciate that. Thanks. You know, given that we're going to talk a lot about emotions and emotional intelligence, I of course I have to ask you about your development. And so I'm going to, you know, you're a songwriter. And so what if I were to ask you to take a moment and just think about your childhood, you know, who you grew up with, your family, and give me a song title that would describe your childhood.
Well, I actually kind of wrote a song about it. It's on my latest book. It's called "I Just Don't Know."
I just don't know.
Yeah.
Now we have to understand. Now you got to unpack that for me.
Yeah. Okay. You know, reflection is almost a discipline, because you have to. I wrote a book and it came out in 2012. But writing the book, I was writing columns. I was writing for the Seattle Weekly. I was writing for ESPN. I was writing for Playboy, financial column. But in writing these stories about myself, they started as columns for the Seattle Weekly. I'm like, that's too personal. Too personal. And then when the idea came to write a book, but the book wouldn't be like a tell-all rock and roll story. The book is the arc of how did a guy like me get all the way into being addicted to all this stuff and the way out. We talk a lot of martial arts in the book, and in there's rock and roll stories, of course, because I didn't live a life in a vacuum, you know.
Right.
My point to this is, so sitting there, my daughters were, you know, 8 and 11 and 9 and 12 when I'm writing this book. And oftentimes I'd be writing, and I'd have a girl on each side of me in their rec room. I'd write anywhere, on a plane, wherever, on my BlackBerry, in the rec room with the girls. And there was a 2,000, 3,000 word missive I was working on. I'm writing away, my girls, innocent girls. And the whole 3,000 words was one big lie that I've been telling to myself. I think human nature is we try to just put little pads around our stories of our life, right?
Yeah.
Or that didn't happen. Or maybe I wasn't such a great person then. I could have done that differently. You know, we all got our ups and downs. And our childhood, my childhood was, there was some chaos, you know, big family, a last of 8 kids. And my parents went through an awful divorce and infidelity. And I saw it, you know, coming home at 2nd grade and seeing the infidelity on the bed of, you know, and your mom's at work and your dad's retired and got this. So, and having to keep that secret because they didn't want to destroy my mom. These types of things really influenced. And you could say, oh, keeping stuff in, that's probably why you got panic attacks later on. Yeah, maybe. Who knows? But my childhood, I can say all these things, gnarly stuff like I just told you. There was plenty of them. There's plenty of them. But didn't we all go through that shit?
We all have something, yeah. But what would you say you learned about like emotions?
I mean, there was a lot of emotions in my house. Yeah, big Irish Catholic family. You know, a lot of hugs, a lot of kisses on the lips. You know, there was a lot of affection. There was a lot of but when the feelings were hurt, it was all out. I mean, it wasn't over emotion, but there was emotion, I guess, if you're asking me this, which you are. My mom was a very open woman, taught me a lot about just being kind and being cool and open-minded to shit. And I think I'm an emotional being, you know. I'll watch the rom-coms. The dumbest rom-com with my wife and well up, you know. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid of it. It's just it's part of me, you know. I want the best for that person on the rom-com, you know. This is a great story. My wife and I have a very romantic, I love that, the romantic side of life. You know, I really do. And I must have learned that some point early on. I know I probably wanted my parents to have that, and that didn't happen. I saw it in the worst sort of way, you know? It was just gross. It was it was just not cool, you know? It was for to see it. So I held in my emotions, and they said, "Oh, he doesn't talk," and that was for about 5 years. Mm. And I didn't notice me not talking, and they'd say it all the time. The older brothers and sisters, "He doesn't talk." And I'm like, "Oh, why did they say that?" And I was thinking a lot. I just remember I was thinking all the time. I was trying to be a non-talkative, non-communicative kid. I probably just didn't know what to say. I've talked to my professional, you know, about that era in my life. It is what it is. And I came out of that, you know, playing music, and punk rock hit right then. I was about 13, you know, it was like everything. It was like, yes. And I came out of that whatever shell or whatever it was, kind of, you know, swinging with both fists. You know, I was into it, and life was great. But the song "Just Don't Know," I go into that. I heard the yelling from the living room, you know. I talk about my sister, like, coming and getting me and, you know, kind of holding on to me. And yeah.
Besides music, can you recall any role models or any people growing up that, you know, someone who kind of supported you in being your true, full feeling self?
My mom's brother, Uncle John, and he was this lion of a man, you know. He'd kiss you on the lips and call you honey. He called everybody honey, you know. Men, women, whatever. Everybody's honey, you know. And he had this really magnetic personality. He was an alcoholic, and he's a doctor. He was all these things. But to me, he was probably feeling wise, like, it's okay to call somebody honey, you know, and kiss them on the lips in all sorts of different ways. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to show your affection and emotion. You know, being in punk rock and kind of being, you know, somewhat of a tough guy, you know, like a little bit. You got to be a tough guy to be in punk rock bands, and then, you know, to move. You got to be in a rock band. I think you like in the 80s too. You got to be like literally a kind of a tough guy because you get in fights and stuff. You know, I probably didn't. I probably held my emotions in a lot of the time, but that went into music, and that's perfect. It's almost meant to be like, oh, you got to be a tough guy or gal to be in music. You know, you got to let it come out. You know, hold in the emotions, let it come out over here. I mean, if you hear Slash play a guitar solo, like every night it's a different thing. And it's like this, he's a guy who doesn't talk a lot, you know, never has. I've known him for 40 years. But man, when he plays, it's there. So there it is. He's talking to you. He's talking to everybody. He's showing.
And do you feel the same way about yourself with being?
I do. I really do. Like I have a guitar kind of everywhere I'm at. I just went on a trip and wrote lyrics for like 16 songs. I'm writing the lyrics for the music I have, and I had melodies, and that's when you really can really start. Like, I shed things, you know. I shed. Oh fuck! I just saw the morning news, you know. It's not even cable. I don't watch cable news anymore. It's just the morning news, you know, local. I got to shed that. I can't hold on to that. And that's probably common these days with all
and
of
you're
us.
a parent. You're a parent.
Right. So we're talking about childhoods, right? So yes.
How do you transfer all this knowledge and into being a dad?
Well, so, you know, the first thing I did when we had Grace, our oldest one, who's now 26, she was about 5 days old. I hadn't slept. You know, what do I do? You know, we just saw a thing, you feed them honey, they could die. Where was that in all the books? You know, somebody just mentioned that to us. What else can kill them? So I called my mom, you know, Mom, what were you thinking of having 8 kids? I'm 5 days into, you know, and I can't, I'm upside down. She goes, oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But she said, you know, none of us know what we're doing when you're a parent. You can read that book, you know, what to expect when you're expecting. But, you know, she didn't have that when she was having kids. But she goes, you just learn. You'll learn. So that told me right away, like, oh, yeah, my parents didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no perfect parent. Like, I was born into this and I know exactly what to do when I have a kid. You don't. So every day is a new day. Like, even my girls are 26 and 23. This is my first day being a parent, a dad to them at this age today.
And what if I were to ask your kids, you know, about the same question I asked you about their emotional development, living in, you know, growing up, what do you think they would say?
Good question. You know, here we are, like Susan and I, thinking, wow, we really did this, you know. The girls were like 20 and 23. Christmas time, it's like a couple nights before Christmas, we all go to this nice dinner in Seattle. Let's go to this. Susan and I we're empty nesting, and we're like patting ourselves on the back. Our girls came out great. We get compliments from our friends, and we really did it, huh? We sit down for this dinner. The girls, they don't drink, really. You know, like they'll have. So, but this night, they each, one of them ordered cocktail. Mm-hmm. The other one, I'll have the cocktail. They got a little hammered. And they started just digging into my Susan and I mean, I'm like, oh, I'm sweating. I'm like, and that time you yelled at me about our dog, and that affected me. Next morning they woke up like, did we say some stuff to you guys last night? Yeah, we should probably talk about it. Oh, we were drunk. We didn't mean any of this. But I think, all that aside, all joking aside, we did our best. You know, I think Susan and I never fought. We never fight. Never fought in front of our kids. Right? We always went to bed together, never separate rooms. I'm very girl protective, big time. I think is what happened with my mom. Mm-hmm. I can translate that exactly over. So I'm very. I think I'm. I think. I'm an emotionally pliable dad. You know, like I'll ride with you. I'll ride with you on these emotions. Little girls, and you know, they can go through all kinds of stuff. It's amazing to watch girls grow up. It's like, oh, because you think of like, when I was a 12-year-old boy, this is what I was worried about. Wow, I was really wrapping myself up in a ball, and you know, girls are fascinating. They have their periods, and all this other stuff happens, and the emotional ups and downs, and boys and stuff. You got to be right there as a dad. I think it's a big responsibility. Big responsibility to be a girl dad. I always thumbs up, like by friends of mine, they go, I got 2 girls. I'm like, okay.
It sounds like obviously you have a great relationship with your wife, Susan. What do you think is the magic strategy that's kept you together? What's the strategy that you guys use or that you use?
Well, nothing's perfect, and I think we realized that at some point. Like I told you, I have a romantic notion of like The Notebook, that kind of stuff, right? The movie, The Notebook. But I guess what makes me emotional is because the good times that we've had are earned. We've learned we each got each other's best interest. So when, I don't know, like if you're with a man or woman or whatever your thing is, and you've got those first 3 years, this is mine, this is mine. Don't ever try to take this away from me. Whatever that is, my habit of doing this, and you're not going to cross this little fence I got up because that's mine. Mm-hmm. Don't try to take it away from me. I've heard if you can make it past that, nobody's trying to take anything away from you. I wasn't trying to take anything away from Susan. When I realized she wasn't trying to take anything away from me, you can take a breath. Okay. That was really kind of stupid of me to think that. And then I realized she would suggest we do something. And in that suggestion, I realized she had thought about my best interests first before I could bring it up. So naturally, she has my best interest at heart when she suggests something, or just in life, today, now. And I do the same for her. I always think of her first, and she knows that.
What about the bands? You work in your bands, right? What do you find is your best strategies for managing those relationships?
Well, it turns out like I'm kind of like the I don't know probably being a big family. Mm-hmm. Being a big family is like being on a team. It's like being in a band. You find your part in that band that serves that band the best. Don't try to be any other things. I learned that sometime in my later teens, right? Before Guns N' Roses. But also a part of me being in a band, an asset that I have is I can help troubleshoot stuff, and which doesn't really happen anymore, but it did happen a lot. So how I manage big personalities, I guess, are other different, big personalities, just different personalities in a band. Everybody's artistic. Everybody wants their piece to come through if you're writing. It's the same kind of thing, like I was messing with Susan. It's kind of like, okay, once you realize everybody wants the best out of the song, nobody's trying to hammer down on your part like that sucks. You suck. Mm-hmm. What are you even doing bringing that part in? Nobody means anything like that. We want the best song we can have, right? On stage, nobody's trying to upstage somebody else, that doesn't come into the, it's like, once you realize these things about your bandmates, and hopefully you can get your band to that place.
Now, I was going to ask, if we can go back, obviously you've shared a lot about alcoholism, drinking a gallon of vodka, right, in a day, which is obviously, significant. How did that become one of your kind of automatic go-to strategies?
It was available, and it worked. It was like the first thing, and 2 beers became 4. You know how alcohol is and substances are. And 4 became 8. And then skip the beer altogether. Let's go hard, because then you can do less again. See, I'm better. I'm better now. Just 3 shots and I'm good. Well, I was doing 8 beers before.
So do you see it separate, from Did you feel like you needed to, like, what were your strategies to manage the fame? Or did that, I'm just curious if that was something that you were more comfortable with.
Well, okay. So, I mean, the getting, being recognized like on the street kind of
You
thing.
got thousands of fans at concerts, you can't go anywhere. And, Seattle's not, I know Seattle well,
We didn't have overnight success. We toured and toured and toured and went from 7 people to 14 to 70, so that once we played to our sold out room of 500, it was like, this is awesome. Like people dig us and they're with us on this journey. And that's always looked at that. It's not like, I saw the Clash in 1979 and something happened in the audience where the band stopped the gig and dressed down the yellow coated security guys for punching a guy and said, there's no thing. Joe's drummer said, there's no difference between us and you. We're all in this thing together, and I'm like, yes, that changed my life. Like, right. It's all one thing. So I always look at it like that. Even when it started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, I'm like, isn't this awesome? We're all in this thing together. But I did, there was a 6-month period, I'll say, 8-month period where we came back to LA from the Appetite for Destruction tour. The record had blown up just at the end of our touring, went to #1 and the single went to number. I mean, it's huge, right? And it'd been on the charts at 95 and 110, and this is back when they had Billboard chart. That's how you gauged. There was no internet. And I went up to top 50 and then in the top 20, top 10. And that stuff was really kind of exciting. Kind of like, what? We're a weird, hard rock band that we say fuck 27 times on our record, we didn't know that. Somebody counted them for us. Like, oh, that's interesting. So that record going to #1, it was like, oh, okay. It's so bizarre, right? For a band like ours. We were playing gigs and moving and grooving, so you don't really catch it. Get home, bought a house. They said, well, you guys need to buy homes. A house? What do you mean? How do you do that? House? Nobody buys, And I noticed people would stare at me at the grocery store. I'd go grocery shopping and there's no manual for this. People are staring at you and you realize we're on the cover of the Rolling Stone right there. There's my big blonde hair and here I am grocery shopping. Just a basket full of booze, maybe a sandwich. People recognize you and whoa. And up on Universal City Walk, people are like, whoa. And then you see our video. This one time at Universal City Walk, our video was on this big screen out on the City Walk for one of our songs. Oh, they're seeing that and they see me. And I've been doing interviews in that time frame. And people are like, how's this success? Because we just suddenly we're huge. How's this success changed your life? I'm like, I don't know that it had. But it must have if everybody's saying this to me. It changed my life. And I realized it hadn't changed my life. And it has never changed my life. It's changed how people perceive me, look at me. Suddenly I had a lot more friends. I was funnier than I ever was. I thought I knew I was funny. But finally, everybody else realized I was funny. And the girls finally saw how good looking I was. And all that kind of stuff. And that's what I realized. When I saw the video up in the thing and that people looking at me, I'm like, oh. And it was kind of lonely. It was kind of like kind of a little bit of a lonely a few weeks after that. I didn't know who to, I go through the little phases, who do I trust? And luckily for me, they're my 4 best friends. We're on a group text, since we were 3 years old. So I have, there's 4 of us together, best friends.
But it sounds like that's another strategy for you, is that you've got this, like, your little board of 4 people that you are like, do you feel like those are people who keep you grounded and emotionally?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, all of us, no matter where we would get out in life, check-in time. Man, check-in time is like, hey, don't get too carried away over here. You know, remember why you're doing this, you know. And that could be me. It could be one of the other guys too. And we all came up through punk rock too. And so we have this real, like, this truth telling, you know, like the punk rock that I learned and came up in, and my martial art they marry together quite well. Really, both of them helped me be a dad, you know, a husband, you know, all of these things I tell you about with my wife. Punk rock and Aikido martial arts paved the way for me.
What are the, like, I want to get really specific with you. Like, when you say that the punk rock and the martial arts kind of gave you the wherewithal to, like, be a better dad, friend, like, what is it? What is the mindset? What are the skills? Like,
Well, I mean, punk rock was about, Susan and I have a radio show on Sirius XM, and we call it 3 Chords in the Truth. And that's really like what I learned in my early days of punk rock. It was, you don't have to tell the truth in every lyric, but it's like expose what's wrong and read a book, know what you're talking about, and talk to others, and we're all in this together. That could be at the rock show. That's humanity, man. We're all in this together. When I start traveling, I'm like, we're studying cultures, you know. I love it, man. I read so much. And that's really because of punk rock, you know, hearing Suspect Device by Stiff Little Fingers when I was 14 years old. What's Suspect Device? My mom came home from work. So, what are you listening to? This band? And she saw these poor boys. They're from Belfast. Suspect Device is a bomb. You know, they're walking home from school and there's a suspect device. I'm like, fucking what? You know, so I started to learn, you know, anarchy in the UK. Why do they want anarchy? What is anarchy? You know? Clash songs were, you know, textbooks into many things, you know.
it does sound like you, like, one of the things I'm hearing is that you really just approach almost everything through a lens of curiosity.
I think because I've always read a lot. I'm interested. I tend to, if I'm not already interested in the subject of something I start a book about, I become interested. I do read good authors. I get, you know, I've always got good, like, people telling me, like, read this book. You'll like this author. So that's key for me. I don't just pick up something and start reading it. I just read this whole, like, study on the 5 points of Lower East Side, you know, it's what's now Chinatown. The history of, but before that, I read the 400-year history of immigration to the Lower East Side. This is all stems from me going to the Tenement Museum down there. You know, I went down a deep dive. I was in the deep dive for about 6 months. So I'll do deep dives into things that I'm curious. If I'm traveling, you know, I've read about the Crusades, you know, tons about the Crusades. You know, I get into this thing like the sieges of Jerusalem, and I get really interested in that. And I travel to these places, so I go and check it out.
I actually want to actually go deeper in one area. And so my question for you is, you know, you're obviously a role model for people in the music industry and all artists. And so what would be your advice to young artists in terms of how do you impart the wisdom in terms of what you've learned to avoid people from having to go through kind of the alcoholism, the drug addiction. Can you, I guess my more provocative way of saying this is, can you envision a artist having success and replacing the alcohol, replacing the drugs with other things to help them achieve that?
Oh, 1000%. Yeah, I just didn't know that. Like, because I started getting successful, I was already in the throes of, I was an alcoholic. So I thought I had to be, you start massaging that alcoholism, like, well, I got to be a little loose. Keith Richards, man, Iggy, And when I got sober, I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to play music again. And how wrong I was, and I got in a band. One of my idols, Steve Jones, from the Sex Pistols, asked me to be in a band with him. I was 1 year, 10 months sober. And I said, Steve, I don't know. But he's Steve Jones, it's like my idol. I learned to play guitar listening to him, My licks were his licks. So he said, oh, you're going to be fine, man. You're going to be fine, mate. And Steve Jones telling me this. And my first gig was like, oh, shit. I feel everything. And I'm playing, my playing was better. And I'm aware of everything that's going on. Like this big kind of like shield came off. And I'm like, why did I get to this sooner? Mm-hmm. But so absolutely 1000% you're going to have the career. And talking to, like you're talking about young people, how do you tell them? I practice that kind of in real life because my kids have grown up around a bunch of other kids. And I'm kind of like the guy, hey, Dad, could you give a call to so-and-so? Do you think we could go have a talk? Dad, my friend, do you think you could talk to him, her? So it's a case-by-case basis, and I'm willing to do it. Like we're a house where the kids like to gather, have been that way since like fourth grade. So we've become like these parents to a bunch of kids. And so I've talked to a bunch of kids who started using it and stuff and got themselves in a bit of trouble. And it is a case-by-case. I don't have a one thing to say. But I inherit tell you, you don't need to get fucked up to play music.
What did you replace the alcohol with?
Martial arts. Mm-hmm. I won't say Susan. I met her 2 years later. But martial arts and music. Mm-hmm. I just dove in. And what a great couple things to do. I started really reading heavier, things. I started thinking about school. Mm-hmm. I could do, it's the other way around. Like the alcohol was like stopping me from doing all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm going to go to business school at Seattle University if I can get in there. I can do a million things. I can play guitar with Steve Jones, be in the same band with one of my idols. I can do this. I can be a dad. I can be a husband. I can do all this stuff. And I know I can do it.
Well, it does seem, like the replacement, what I mean by is that you have music, you've got relationships, you've got your friends, you've got your martial arts, you've got education. Like that became your go-to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. I started writing for, publications and all this stuff like I'd only dreamed up when I was getting fucked up, so I've been able to realize my life.
Nice. In our work, we have a tool. We call it the mood meter. I'll give you a little treat of it. So it's this little tool to help people build their emotion vocabulary. It's got all these feeling markers. And so there's like these different quadrants. There's the yellow quadrant. That's like your happy, excited, optimistic quadrant. Yeah. And so when Duff wants to be in the yellow, like what do you do?
I mean, in the very near future, take my dog for a walk, play some ball with him. That's a yellow meter thing. Cool. Yeah, definitely. see what my wife's up to. Like today's, I don't have to do much. I started off with martial arts. So that's a yellow meter thing. I try to have yellow meter things in there. I do a lot of nerdy shit, crossword puzzles and all the word games. And
Cool.
yeah.
All right. So when Duff wants to be kind of calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, relaxed, serene,
Read.
what's that for you?
Read. Again, work out. Get on my Peloton.
Mm-hmm.
That I can go to this place on my Peloton. I ride it. You know, I love cardiovascular challenge, and that comes from martial arts. I love it. You know, going to the brink, and because I can really meditate, and being in that brink, it gets me to a breakthrough place. So working out, reading.
And how about when you're in that, you're in the blue place? Do you ever have days where you're just sort of like, it's not a good day. I'm down, disappointed, a little hopeless, a little despair. What pulls you out of that?
Well, I mean, I've had some bad despairs that came at about 50 years old that came out of nowhere. Again, like my panic attack in the shower. I got my first depression attack at a movie theater. It wasn't a panic attack. I was going down. And so that's when I started getting psychiatric help, you know. So I don't have those for the last few years, which is great. Like since 2017.
What about just daily kind of like just a little, you're a little.
So when you
blah.
say despair to me, I'm like, which one?
Yeah,
Which one
let's do the light blue. Light blue.
Light blue. I mean, there's different levels in there. When a friend of yours passes, there's family member passes. There's that despair, and how do you deal with that? And I tend to end up being of service to others. Really helps me.
Nice.
If I'm not just death of somebody, but
sure,
even if it's a little bit of a shit day or something for whatever reason, I think getting out of myself and, really realizing that somebody's got something else way worse than me, and maybe I should give them a call.
Last one is that kind of red quadrant. You're angry, overwhelmed, frustrated. What's your down regulation from anger strategy?
Yeah. I like your Perry thing. I do a lot of that. Redirect. If you're mad at the guy, if there's some traffic, and there's some guy riding there or a gal, whatever, just realize they're taking that energy home and feel sorry for their, or whatever your thing is. God bless his family. And, I try to send good thoughts to that person and to the family who they might affect, take that energy home to. What that does is suddenly you're not up and you're, on your wheel and you're pissed. You're not taking that energy home. Why let somebody out there send you home with that bad energy? Right?
Yeah, I love it.
You know what I'm saying? I
do. I mean, there's in psychology, there's a technical term for that. We call it reappraisal, right? Okay. You're just like, reframing it, like, let me put a different spin on this. Let me, create a different story.
Right. And we all have it in us to be bigger than that energy. That's, let's just say the road rager on them. That's a great analogy for it. But, we're all, let them take that home, and God bless the people they're going home to. I hope everything's cool. I'm not going to take that home with me. Are you kidding me? True. Go ahead. You go ahead, bud.
Yeah. All right. Last question for you. I want you to imagine a world where from early childhood to elementary, middle school, high school, college, beyond, like people really learn about emotions. They learn about strategies to deal with their feelings. Given the world we live in today, what do you think might be different about our world?
That's a crazy question. Where everybody's just gotten letting go of their emotions and free to express them. There's no judgment. There's no all that stuff. I don't know. I think I'd live in a world like that. I think you should maybe if you just start that small instead of going to the whole world, start that in your own little backyard, I feel like I've got that pretty. Of course, yeah. I think those little small worlds might start connecting up. Who knows? But like worrying about somebody else's emotions somewhere else, could only like that goes into that to me that goes into that car driver, the road rager, like worrying about something else. If you can take care of what's going on in your four walls of your home and around that, in my case, your band and your workplaces, that's what should matter.
Thank you. And so last thing is for you to give information so people can learn more about your work.
Okay, so I do have a website. I write things for it. I don't ever go and check it, but I write things for little updates and whatnot. It's duffonline.com. My wife, Susan, and I have a radio show called 3/4 of the Truth on Sirius XM on Ozzy's Boneyard. It plays all through the week, You can, my wife knows this stuff way better than me. You can stream it anytime, whatever. And we're on radio stations kind of around the world.
Awesome. Duff, Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Duff McKagan as much as I did. My take-home message was the power of finding your thing, in Duff's case, the martial arts, to support your mental health. I also really appreciated Duff's perspective on the power of being other-oriented as a strategy for dealing with emotions, especially when your inclination is to hide. Let me know down below in the comments your thoughts about today's episode. I'm particularly interested in hearing what your thing is. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, share episodes with your friends, and follow me on social media for additional tips and strategies. Really glad to have you on the Dealing with Feelings journey along with me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.